On the very next screen of this process is where the exciting things come in, which is you'll be uploading your prepared interior and cover files. What you see on my screen here, I have already went ahead and uploaded my interior file, but if you would like to see how to do that, it's basically really simple. I would drag and drop my prepared file onto that box there, and it will tell you it's uploading and it's doing whatever it needs to do. Now, you will see here on my screen that it gives me this orange notice about line thickness and transparency and all that. If you remember earlier on in one of the earlier sessions while we were preparing this document, we had made sure to remove any kind of file transparency. And as far as the thickness is concerned, I have also personally looked through the lines that are in the file, specifically the lines where people write on. Those are the ones that I'm most concerned with. And I've looked through all that and everything looks good. And it's still giving me this error no matter what I've tried as far as the line thickness is concerned. And I think that has to do with the design, like the flowers and the garlands on the top. And honestly, I'm not all that concerned about that. So when you have issues like this that pop up on your screen, what you should be most concerned with are the lines where people write on, the blank lines, or your checkbox lines and stuff like that that could hinder the use of your workbook or your journal. Anything else, it usually is related to the design, and I'm not too worried about that. Now, what about the transparency issue here? Again, I have done all my homework and made sure that there are no transparencies and all that is good. How big an issue is this? If I go to Lulu's knowledge base and I type transparency issue, this thing will come up common publishing issue errors and how to fix them. And then I click on this. And if I go down to transparency and click here, it says here that the severity is just a warning, which means it's not a showstopper. And under necessary actions, it says none. So at this point, I'm not going to worry about it because we've already done our homework earlier on and we know that the file is good. So we're just going to leave that. Page count is 30. The size is correct. And then now it comes to the color options. Now, personally, for this particular project, I want to print it in color. And I'm really not so concerned about it being premium, so I'm going to go with color standard. Of course, premium color will change the pricing of your workbook. If you're doing this to sell in your store, I would suggest duplicating this project later on and then coming in here to select a black and white standard. That way, your customers will have the option to buy a color version and a standard version depending on their budget. Now we come to paper type. Now, this is where I will go all out as far as the cost. I will choose the 80-pound white coated. We can, of course, choose the 60-pound, but personally, most paper planner and paper journal users and paper workbook users are very particular about paper because they use things like markers and fountain pens, ink pens that are really saturated with ink. And when your paper is thinner, it tends to bleed really badly. So I personally have ordered from Lulu my own planner with the 80-pound white paper. And while it does bleed, it's very rare for you to be able to do a print-on-demand book with paper that does not bleed because the costs are crazy high. But even though there is some bleeding, but it is minimal, and I think that it is acceptable. Paper planner users are picky on this, but they do accept a little bit of bleeding. So this 80-pound is acceptable and is what I recommend that you do. Bookbinding, of course, we have done everything possible up to this point to make sure that we have a coil bound option. And so I'm going to choose that. Why coil bound? Because planner and journal users are again very particular about binding. If you choose any other option, they cannot open the planner and have it lay flat. Laying flat a planner, journal, or workbook is super important, and that is why you want coil bound. Next, we are asked to choose whether we want a glossy finish or a matte finish on the workbook. This is very much a personal preference. I normally prefer a matte because I like the feel and the look of a matte finish, but of course, you can use a glossy finish. Most workbooks and journals you find are glossy finish. If you toggle between these two, you will find that there is no price difference for the finish. Pick the one that you like the best. Now, of course, after you do this, it will tell you what the finish print cost will be for your workbook. And in this case, it's $8.10, your cost to print. And if you're doing Lulu Direct, it's $9.72. Again, early on, we talked about Lulu Direct. This is the true print on demand, where somebody purchases from your WooCommerce store or your Shopify store, for example, and then the order goes directly into Lulu and they will print that one book itself and send it out immediately. Whereas this cost is you have to buy a certain amount, keep it in stock, and then send out. Whether you send it out or whether you send it to a fulfillment center, that's completely up to you. Just keep that in mind when you're pricing things and you're deciding how you want to sell it. All right, the next section here, as you can see, I have already uploaded my cover file, and the process is the same as with the interior pages. You either click this to upload your file or you drag and drop like you did before. So I'm not going to do this again. This part is pretty straightforward. And now you get to preview your workbook. And in your preview, these are all turned on by default. Your margin is this dark blue thick section, and you can toggle it to see, right? Your bleed is this over the top there, and the folds is the center here, and then the trim is where they will cut it off. So if you go through all the pages here, you can look through your pages, and what you can do is for one final time, you can see if all your content that you want is inside the blue area and the bleed is all done properly. You can just paste through here really quickly. And I think for me, everything looks good. Remember, we had the earlier line warning. I don't really see any issues here at this point. I'm good with this. We're done with this section. We'll move on to the next section, which is add book details.